Let's talk about migraines. Migraines are triggered by thoughts of guilt and condemnation over a conflict in your life, followed by fear and anxiety. It is not the conflict that triggers the migraine, it is the guilt and condemnation that you have with yourself over the conflict that triggers the migraine. For example, say you went to a party and had too much to drink and you had an argument with your wife about it. Or say that a woman spends too much money and ends up having a fight with her husband about it. The argument or the fight is not what causes the migraine. It is the guilt that you have with yourself over the conflict that will produce the migraine. Migraines are triggered in people who have conflict with themselves about a conflict in life with others where they do not like themselves anymore about this issue. It begins with guilt, and out of that guilt comes fear, in that order. Here is what happens on a physical level. Firstly, there's a reduction in the hormone serotonin, and then there is an increase in the production of histamine. Remember, the hypothalamus is the area in your brain that is the connection between your mind and your body. It is responsible for converting everything that goes on in your thought life into a physical reaction. As you know from our discussion on depression, addictions, and weight gain, the hypothalamus will respond to thoughts of self-condemnation and guilt by lowering the levels of the hormone serotonin. And when the serotonin levels are lowered, it causes the whole central portion of your brain, which is called the deep limbic system, to inflame. This is when fear and anxiety in your thought life over the issue begins to develop, and this leads to an oversecretion of the chemical histamine, which, remember from session 4, is the chemical that causes inflammation. Serotonin has several functions in the brain. You already know that it is the hormone that makes you feel good about yourself. But another function of serotonin is to maintain the normal diameter of the blood vessels so that they supply the correct amount of blood to each area of the brain. Serotonin is a vasoconstrictor. In other words, this chemical will decrease the diameter of the blood vessels. Histamine is a vasodilator. It increases the diameter of the blood vessels. So serotonin and histamine have antagonistic or opposite actions in the body. When the serotonin levels are reduced because of guilt in your thought life, the histamine levels are able to increase because of fear and anxiety. So the serotonin levels have decreased, the brakes are off vasodilation, and the histamine levels increase, causing the diameter of the blood vessels to increase. So now you have enlarged and swollen blood vessels that will exert pressure on the pain-sensitive nerves and structures in your brain, and that is what causes the pain of a migraine. Drugs that are used to treat migraines, such as Emitrix, work by increasing the levels of serotonin and decreasing the levels of histamine. In other words, there are serotonin enhancers and antihistamines. Emitrix is a beta blocker, which means it stops that whole stage 2 and 3 stress reaction, which comes as a result of fear and anxiety in your thought life. When the stage 2 and 3 stress reaction is stopped, it prevents the release of histamine, and it also increases the levels of serotonin. This returns the blood vessels to the normal diameter, so now pressure is no longer exerted on the pain-sensitive structures in your brain, and the pain of the migraine is over. But this is just an artificial way of restoring you to peace in your soul. It did not solve the underlying problem. It just swept it under the rug. It has deluded you into feeling good about yourself, but in your heart, you still do not like yourself. So if you feel better, what does it matter? Well, did God create you to be chemically manipulated and deluded, where you pretend that you don't have a spiritual problem? Emitrix is a cheap substitute for the peace of God. You don't have to rely on drugs to stop or prevent migraines. You can do it by controlling your thought life and renewing your mind with the Word. Deal with the guilt, self-conflict, and fear that is tormenting you, so that you can enjoy God's peace. When your thought life is right before God, you won't get an imbalance in your serotonin and histamine levels, and a migraine will not happen. Even when you feel a migraine coming on, you can stop it from fully developing by quickly sorting out your thought life. This may take time and practice, but that is what will produce long-term freedom. This is what true spiritual warfare is all about, bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Now you know your enemy, you understand his tactics and how he makes a migraine